Hey everybody, welcome back to my new Ask an Amazon Agency video series. Speaking with Laurel Butts today of Cartograph. How are you doing, Laurel?
Doing well, thank you.
I wanted to start off getting your impression of how Q4 went, how you think people should data assess their performance, maybe even a little post-mortem in terms of things they did right, things they could have done better, things that didn't go as expected. What are those conversations like with some of the brands you work with? Where do you start them? And then how many times do you kind of pick apart Q4, or do you just push on into Q1 for next year?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So really what we like to do is leverage all the tentpole events that Amazon sets at the back half of the year. So obviously there's July Prime Day, and then I think October Prime Day is here to stay. And then we have Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So reflecting, we pulled our entire team for all of their accounts and all the performance, comparing it to July,
Mhm.
October Prime Day, and then also just really doing a deep dive into Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Now that Cyber Monday is for at least this year and next year in December, it really changes the way we set goals and some of the performance as well. So we've really seen that discounts are the way to go, right? Like you have to participate, you have to pay to play in these big Amazon tentpole events. Otherwise, you'll just be left kind of behind the pack. So
Mhm.
engaging in the participation is really key. We saw that some moderate discounts are appropriate and they do drive growth and incrementality for high AOV products. If you can do like a steep discount for multiple days in a row, very short flights, we saw a huge lift from that. But
Mhm.
if you can't swing that from a margin perspective, 20% is perfectly fine. It also will really drive some escalation for your sales growth.
Right. I'm curious if people talk to you before next year even starts about how expensive ads were in Q4 and that influences their projections for Q1 ad spend? Or is that something like, we hash that out when we have to, we don't do it 3 months in advance?
No, it's a huge consideration in forecasting. I always expect that the cost to advertise and convert in Q4 is going to be higher, and we're still seeing that. We're still seeing, especially with the escalation of the tentpole events now that there's one in October, November, and December, we're seeing that. But I do want to highlight that there's an opportunity here, right? It's a pay to play model, but at the same time, like there's an influx of traffic and
Mhm.
it's worth participating. There's also, cheaper inventories, like sometimes video is a little bit more inexpensive or converts better. So making sure that the strategy is diversified in terms of where the ads are serving and how our strategy is set up is really important. You could even like with display advertising and DSP, you could just be running campaigns in lower funnel, remarketing, retargeting lines, but still see a really strong return. And the way that we measure that now is with AMC, the
Mhm.
advent of Amazon's marketing cloud.
Right.
We're leveraging that now to see, our new to brand purchase percentage and the path to conversion with our ad platforms and the different inventories that we have. Is someone actually engaging with DSP and then going to sponsor product and then converting, or how are they engaging with our campaigns across the Amazon platform?
Yeah. So, I mean, some people say Amazon's improved their tools quite a bit and you've got more data at your disposal, make better choices. Do you think you have to kind of take better data and make a better choice because you have the right strategy, like you've proven it before and you're just modifying it? How much experimentation is too much? Or in terms of like, you don't want your ad spend to artificially inflate without the benefit of additional revenue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair point, but it really comes down to what the growth plan is for the business, right? Like, are we just looking at profitability? Are we looking at cash flow?
Mhm.
Or are we willing to sacrifice some margin for growth and really go after the targets that we see as our top category targets and our top competitors? And so I want to be mindful of the overall business plan and the objective there and
Mhm.
be respectful of that in assessing our budgets and then also our promotional plans as well. But I mean, we have proven year over year after year that when we target and also just participate in these tentpole events that we see a return. And then when we support that with off-channel participation in email, SMS, text messages, Instagram pushes on, the stories and all of that traffic, it really builds to a very strong performance during these events. And whether we want it to or not, Amazon drives traffic during these events, right? So why not?
Yeah, of course.
And that's what I really advocate for is like, okay, maybe we don't need like a huge crazy discount and it's not something that's viable for the business, but what can we do? Can we send an email to your dead list? Can we, what options do we have and how can we get creative there? But I really believe it's very important to understand where we performed historically, to understand what we can do to innovate on the plan that we have in place and not be satisfied with where it's sitting, right now. Like, can we test these new promotions that Amazon's running out?
Right.
All of these brand tailored promotions are huge. We have so many options now. And the subscribe and save coupons on vendor and seller central, um, it leads itself to experimentation year over year.
Well, do you also talk about, we should be launching more SKUs each year and that level of aggression where it's, you have to kind of keep competition dynamic, not just play with pricing. I mean, I was going to ask you a question about pricing next,
Sure.
but even before that, how much are people deciding what to invest in, putting money back into the business, launching new SKUs, making accessories for a product or whatever it might be, to make sure that they keep a level of interest in their brand and in different products that they might start the new year out with by launching, right?
Yeah, I think it's important to take a critical eye to the catalog, and to really look at your sales mix because more is not always more on Amazon. And that I often perform SKU rationalizations for accounts, because usually the top, I would say 60 to 80% of your sales are only in a couple of ASINs.
Okay.
Going wide is not always the best option. But it's really important to look at how the catalog's designed. So I really believe in an acquisition SKU. So usually it's a lower MSRP item. It could be one of, in each that you have in a multi-pack, but, higher up on your price point. And it's not necessarily driving AOV, but it is driving new to brand acquisition. And it is a really great trial item and could potentially be a loss leader. And that's okay if you take a blended margin approach to it. Oftentimes, heroes are variety packs. So for many of my clients, variety packs are the top SKU because it's such a great option on Amazon. I think they perform so well. But having like really strong pack outs, and having a mix that is indicative of, okay, this is driving you to brand. I may be sacrificing the margin here, but then upper, with my repeat customers, I have something that has a higher price point, and I'm okay with that, because it's actually building me margin.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I always wondered how early in the process do people start looking at next year, or is it just heads down focused on Q4 with minimal amount of time and effort and energy and attention put on Q1? But it just seems like competition is too strong for that now, and you have to the extent that you can, you have to map this out 4 or 5 months ahead of time. And in terms of like even things similar to, inventory management, making sure that you're selling through everything quickly, right? So getting that number perfectly calibrated in terms of how much you're going to manufacture, ship, sell within Q1, within Q2. So forecasting, I mean, you almost have to be top of your game to forecast these days, right? And then they put out these announcements about fees. Maybe people aren't talking about storage fees so much right now, but that's for right now. Um, there's so much that goes into it. I don't know how you keep pulse straight.
Yeah, planning, lots
I
of
mean,
planning.
practice and experience, right? And planning. But what is different now versus how you did it a couple of years ago? Is it just too many factors? Or is it each decision you have a much bigger risk of if you make a mistake, it's costing you a lot more now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons learned, in terms of, like, let's just start with inventory. That's my love language. I'm all
Right.
treating at Cartograph that the staying in stock is sexy, right? Like a lot of people
Mhm.
gravitate towards ads and content, but if you don't have
Right.
like you can't run any of that. So yeah, thinking about inventory, I actually, with the announcement that Amazon made at the end of July that they weren't really going to prioritize, any receiving in the back half of the year, and that they would really focus on sending product to customers.
Mhm.
I asked my team to send in their inventory in September, for the entire
Okay.
quarter. which usually I wouldn't do, right? Like, but we have to pivot according to the way that Amazon is operationally strained. And in October, they moved to a regional cross-dock system, which became really challenging, and it still is right now. We're seeing receiving times on LTL about a month long. So small parcel is a great pivot if we need to, but it can be expensive, right?
Yeah.
So balancing that is really important. But we forecast, for the upcoming year, usually in September, and really want to have a mind to how is Q4 going to perform, and then what is the next year going to look like, including the next, Q4 that we're
Yeah.
up against. So
Yeah.
really taking the time to distill the learnings from, all of the traffic that we've been engaging in, all of our strategies, and make sure that it's the right one, right? Like, is there something that we need to pivot on or something that we need to innovate on? And moving that into not only Q1, but also through that entire year of 2025.
Yeah. And you probably inherit some brands who have left other agencies. That seems to be something that's going on lately. How do you start kind of fact finding mission, doing some research onto what they did right, what they did wrong, and then explain to them like, well, we've got a different strategy. Obviously, they don't want to do the same strategy. If it wasn't working, then maybe you wouldn't have been talking to them, right? How do you begin? Is that an awkward process? Is that extremely common? Is it not a big deal anymore because people do make these kinds of changes?
Yeah, I think it's something that we really handle in our business development conversation. And we do a really thorough ad audit. You look at the catalog and look at where the pain points are and
Hmm.
see if we can bring something new to the table. Like I mentioned, like we're really leveraging AMC, we're really leveraging brand analytics and everything new that they're rolling out and building our own strategies. And we have a playbook. And one of the advantages of Cartograph is that we, manage your end-to-end Amazon business, right? So like we're handling operations just as much as we're handling the advertising piece. And that can be helpful to the client because it's a comprehensive perspective of the business.
Yeah, no, and it's just a hot topic. I get asked this a lot from people who want my opinion. I don't do full account management. I don't do these fully developed strategies. It's hard for me to weigh in on some of those things. So it's great to have conversations like this because I can get your perspective on it. And it helps educate me, not just anyone listening to this, but in terms of what are the key factors, what are the things to experiment with or not, right? What other questions do you tend to get January or February of a new year if people are like going over the Q4 numbers and kind of, we could have done better.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like, did we have all of our ducks in a row? And and what are we doing that's like really creative and innovative? Like I mentioned, like brand tailored promotions, huge opportunity right now. We can target cart abandoners. We can target people who are interested in the brand. And Amazon sets up those audiences for us. So that's something that is really helpful to be able to leverage. But I mean, I think seasonality is a big factor here, right? Like if you're not a new year brand, like why push there, right? Like
Hmm.
find your area of opportunity.
Right.
Maybe you're a summer like grilling season brand or something like that, or you can tell I deal with a lot of food categories.
Right. Right. Good. We can't talk about that too long. It might make me hungry and then I'll wrap this up prematurely. Now, what other types of advice do you give to people? Do you guys have some initiatives that are coming up in the new year that you haven't focused on in the past, things that you want to promote or put out in front of people to consider?
Yeah, something that we're working on right now is we have a partner, brand trace that really works at buy box management. That's the biggest point, right? Is you want to make sure you're controlling your buy box
Hmm.
100% of the time. So part of that could be price matching. You don't have an IMAP policy across all of your
Right.
channels, and Amazon's price matching you because you're not the most advantageous offer to the customer.
Yes.
But some of it could be third party sellers where you're hemorrhaging some of those things at a different point in the distribution chain, right?
Hmm.
So we like to stop the bleeding at the source because that's been a significant pain point for many, many clients, whether they are, top tier or, they're starting out as small businesses. That's something that we've been partnering with Brand Trace to make sure that we are, stewarding that and making sure that that is completely um, kind of buttoned up. They can go to the distributor on the distributor level and also make a partnership there that will help kind of the flow of that down to the Amazon listing.
Right. Nice. And then, yeah, in terms of that was my last question, price. I mean, how much discussion time do you spend around moving things up, moving things down? Are people hyper focused on that, or is that just part of the conversation the way it's always been? And you have your negotiation or your discussion about the best way to price things, and then you move on.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it comes back to those goals, right? Like, what's the holistic goal of this account? And what do we want for this year? Is it profitability or is it growth? Because we have a unit level margin analysis that we conduct before we kind of sell anything and put anything through on Amazon. And we also have a P&L that measures the success of that. So it's really like this kind of bookend that is available to our clients.
Mhm.
But I think it's important to look at, yeah, like, do we wanna be profitable? Because then we probably need a higher price point, but where's the competition selling? Like, in the
Exactly.
category, are you the most premium? Are you kind of middle of the pack? Or are you
Mhm.
really, inexpensive? Because that determines the ad strategy. And that determines, like I was saying, like, that catalog kind of strategy of going wide on, I have an acquisition SKU, I have a bigger pack out. So that's something that we really like to look at.
Great. And if people have questions for you, best place to reach Laurel Butts.
Yeah, Laurel at gocartograph.com. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll have another conversation like this again. I think we touched on a couple of things, especially around the resellers and being in control of your supply chain and keeping an eye on, things that aren't necessarily 100% laser focused on Amazon. But thanks for having this conversation with me today. Hopefully, people will contact you directly. If you're wondering how to reach Laurel or have any questions for me, Chris at eCommerce Chris, of course. And thanks, Laurel, for joining. Talk to you again.
Thank you so much for the time.